Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2019 Advanced. In this section and the next one, we're going to look at the Excel web app. This is actually quite a difficult part of the course to cover because the Excel web app tends to change at an alarmingly quick rate, and whatever I show you in this couple of sections of the course is likely to have changed by the time you actually come to this part of the course yourself, possibly several months after I've recorded it. So the first thing I need to explain is what the Excel web app actually is. And that is that it's a facility available from Microsoft where you can edit workbooks using an internet browser rather than using the Excel desktop program. Now, the Excel web app does a pretty good job, as I'm hoping to show you, but the important thing to remember is that it is a really quite restricted version of Excel. Whatever you may have read about the Excel web app, and bearing in mind that it has improved greatly in recent times, as you're going to see, it is still quite restricted in what you can do with it. Having said that, even for some very advanced uses of Excel, you may find it a very useful facility. Now, this is an Excel 2019 course and not an Office 365 course. But you may well find that you have access to OneDrive, Mail, Calendar online through a personal Microsoft account. So if you have a Hotmail account or maybe a live.com account, it will give you access to the web versions of your applications. And also, a lot of the time they come with a certain amount of free OneDrive storage. I'm not really primarily dealing with OneDrive itself, although I will be referencing it from time to time, and I will of course be storing some workbooks in it. The important thing here is going to be Office 365 and in particular the Excel web app. Now at the moment I'm logged into my Office 365 personal account and I'm looking at OneDrive. And I have here a workbook that I created a little while ago, and it's called Opening Hours 2018.xlsx. Now, if I open that document up, you'll see that I'm now viewing it in a web browser. Once my spreadsheet has been opened up in a browser, I have the option of making minor edits in here, or alternatively, I could click on the Open in Excel button, which will open my spreadsheet in my desktop version of Excel, the full 2019 version. I'm going to stick with editing in the browser for the time being. So now I can see my workbook, and I can also see the ribbon that is available in the Excel web app. You'll notice that there are less tabs on the ribbon than there are normally. One or two tabs, such as the Review tab, really has quite restricted options in comparison to the desktop version. And the View tab is also relatively considerably reduced compared to the desktop application. The Data tab again considerably reduced, and as far as Insert is concerned, there are some notable omissions, but you can, for example, do things like insert charts. And please always do remember to bear in mind that you have this Open in Excel button that you can click on at any time if you need to utilize functions that are not available in the web browser version. Let's continue to move left through the tabs. The Home tab has quite a few options on it, so we can cut, copy and paste. We have some formatting options, auto sum, and some reasonably comprehensive facilities for formatting cells and so on. Where we see a big difference though is on the File tab, the equivalent in the desktop application of Backstage View, because we have an open facility with a list of recent documents, but if I click on Save As, the first thing I see is where's the Save button? Click here to learn about saving in Excel Online. So where is the Save button? Well, there isn't one in Excel Online because your workbook is being saved automatically. It's actually saved at very frequent intervals. Obviously, you're working online. There is a danger that your internet connection could get broken, so it's saved at frequent intervals. It's also saved with a default name, and what you can either do is use the Save As facility to save it as a different name, or you also have a rename facility as well, which will allow you to just rename the default name of this workbook. Generally speaking, you will use one or the other of those facilities when you're saving online. You might also want to download a copy, so you have that option there as well. Now, the other options you can see in Excel Online's version of Backstage View is a print option and a share option where you can invite other people to view or edit your workbooks. And then you have information such as information contained in About, and of course you have access to help here as well. So we've had a little bit of a tour around the Excel web app interface, and we're going to create a workbook and do some work on it in the next section. But there are 2 or 3 things to show you now. Earlier on, we looked at the View tab on the ribbon, and one of the options there is Reading View. If you switch to Reading View, you no longer see the ribbon, and this is the view that other users would see if you shared this workbook with them, but without giving them the ability to edit this workbook. So they will essentially be in read-only mode. For people who do have access to edit this workbook, we can use the Edit Workbook button and choose to open in the desktop version of Excel or continue to edit in browser. And when you select that option, you'll see that you get the ribbon back there with full access to the commands and functionality. So let's suppose I've been working on this Opening Hours 2018 workbook, and I do decide to save it to my PC. So I'm going to click on File, Save As, and I'm going to select Download a Copy. And if you look down in the status bar at the bottom, you can see it's downloading. And when it's doing that, it's essentially saving it to my Downloads folder on my PC. Of course, you can move that after the fact if you want to, but that's where it goes by default. So if I want to now open it, I can just click on my download and it will open in the desktop version of Excel. I'm going to click Enable Editing so that I can make changes. And there we go. My document is essentially saved to my Downloads folder on my PC, and I now have access to Excel's full functionality to make any edits to this workbook. So you've just seen how to download a workbook from Excel Online to your computer and open it in Excel 2019. Let's do the opposite now. This time I'm going to start with a workbook on the desktop that's got pivot tables and charts. And the thing is, it's a pretty complex workbook, this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it into OneDrive. So I select File, Save As, and then I select the OneDrive folder I want to save it into. So I'm saving it into my OneDrive Personal. And I'm going to quickly amend this name very slightly, just remove the copy of, and I'm going to click Save. Now bear in mind that when you're saving this to OneDrive, you're not actually going to open it in the Excel web app automatically. And you may well just be going to save this workbook there without any intention of opening it using the Excel web app. But what I'm going to do here is just close this desktop copy of Excel. And I'm going to go back into my OneDrive. And when you go back into OneDrive, sometimes you might need to do a refresh of the browser, but it doesn't look like I need to do that because I can see my file sitting there in my files list in OneDrive. And let's check to make sure that we can open our store data file by clicking on it. And there is the workbook open in the Excel web app. Now, just because you can open it, that doesn't mean that all aspects of a workbook will work. Some will and some won't, depending on the current facilities available in the Excel web app. You certainly can't run things like macros in the web app, so no VBA code will work, but you can very easily save workbooks from your desktop Excel to OneDrive. And from OneDrive, you can open those workbooks, and subject to what the workbook contains and what you want to do, you may very well be able to work on that workbook in the web app. So that's a bit of a tour of the web app. In the next section, we're going to create a workbook and just get a feel of how you work on a workbook in Excel Online. That's the next section. I will see you then.